They say men over 40 stop chasing love. But that isn't apathy, it's awakening. There comes a point in a man's life when silence speaks louder than pursuit, when he realizes that most of what he once called love was performance, a negotiation dressed as romance. By 40, he's seen the pattern: effort mistaken for worth, attention mistaken for intimacy, and validation mistaken for connection, and the numbers reflect it. According to the Pew Research Center, a record 25% of American men at age 40 have never married, double the share from 3 decades ago. Yet surveys show fewer report loneliness than expected. Instead, many describe contentment through independence. Something profound shifts here. After decades of chasing approval, a man begins to see how the modern dating economy feeds on exhaustion, on endless swiping, proving, performing. Psychologists at the University of Michigan call it romantic disengagement. Not bitterness, but a withdrawal from illusion, a return to emotional realism. He stops running not because he's lost the will to love, but because he's learned to see love without chasing it. He no longer needs to pursue meaning through another. He becomes it. There's a quiet shift happening beneath the surface of modern masculinity, a withdrawal that isn't weakness, but awareness. Men over 40 are beginning to step back from the performance of romance, not because they've lost capacity for love, but because they've begun to see the architecture of the system that sells it. Love, as it's presented today, is no longer simply emotion, it's economy. It's packaged, curated, optimized. Every gesture is filtered through metrics, attention, validation, digital presence. And while younger generations swim naturally in this current, men over 40 often stand at its edge, watching, remembering a time when connection felt human, not algorithmic. They've seen the shift firsthand. In the 1990s, a man might meet his partner through friends, work, or shared spaces. In 2025, 55% of all new relationships in the US begin online. That's not progress alone, it's transformation. And with transformation comes fatigue. Because what these men discover, slowly and painfully, is that modern love rewards visibility, not depth. The loudest win attention, the quietest go unseen. But depth has always been a masculine pursuit, not in dominance, but in meaning. So the man who has weathered decades of ambition, loss, and rebuilding starts to feel out of rhythm with a world that prizes novelty over loyalty. Pause there. This isn't about resentment, it's about realism. Psychologists from Stanford found that emotional stability increases with age, especially in men. After 40, the limbic system, the part of the brain that drives impulsive emotion, begins to quiet. Decisions become slower, more deliberate. That biological calm shifts how a man relates to desire. He no longer seeks adrenaline, he seeks alignment. And here lies the first fracture between man and system. The dating market runs on speed, but wisdom moves slowly. What feels like detachment is often just discernment. The broader issue, then, isn't that men stop chasing love. It's that love, as defined by modern culture, stops being worth the chase. Because the system, built on consumption and stimulation, thrives on restlessness. Romantic apps, entertainment, and social media teach us to desire endlessly, but never to arrive. And the man who has lived long enough to notice begins to step outside the cycle. When he was younger, he believed pursuit was purpose, that proving himself to a woman, to the world, was proof of value. But over time, he learns that validation is an unstable foundation. Relationships built on performance collapse under silence, so he withdraws, not from love, but from illusion. Let's call it what it is: spiritual fatigue. Not apathy, but awareness. The realization that chasing attention in a distracted world is like whispering truth in a storm. And yet, modern narratives still mock this withdrawal. They call it fear of intimacy, commitment issues, or loneliness denial. But what if it's something deeper, a conscious refusal to play a game that no longer feels sacred? Look at the data. Marriage rates are at historic lows across the developed world. The US Census Bureau reports that men aged 40 to 44 today are twice as likely to be single compared to their father's generation. Meanwhile, studies from the University of Chicago reveal that life satisfaction among single, never-married men over 40 is steadily increasing, especially among those with stable income and strong social circles. It challenges the myth that men who stop chasing are lonely. Maybe they're simply at peace. And yet beneath that peace there's complexity, because men still want connection, but connection that means something. A study from Harvard's Grant and Gluck research, the longest ongoing study on adult development, found that deep, stable relationships, not romance, not money, are the greatest predictors of lifelong happiness. Men know this intuitively by 40, but the question is no longer, can I find love? It becomes, can I find truth in love? And that question has no quick answer. Society tells men to open up, to stay vulnerable, but often punishes vulnerability with indifference or exploitation. So men learn self-containment. They retreat into purpose, hobbies, mentorship. Not because they've shut down, but because they've redirected the same energy once poured into pursuit. They evolve from lovers chasing validation to builders chasing meaning. Every system demands energy. The dating system demands it constantly. And for many men, the return on that emotional investment feels increasingly uncertain. So, they reallocate. They invest inward, into health, into purpose, into peace. It's not cynicism, it's conservation. The man over 40 has nothing left to prove to the crowd. He's built, failed, forgiven, started over. He's watched affection fade and loyalty fracture. And after all of that, he understands something the system doesn't want him to see. That the truest form of love cannot be chased. It can only be met by two people walking, not running, toward one another. That's the broader truth behind this modern silence. Men aren't abandoning love, they're reclaiming it from noise. The real reason men over 40 stop chasing love isn't that they've lost desire, it's that they've begun to see the system behind it. The illusion was never love itself. It was what the world taught men to believe about how love should be earned. From boyhood, most men are conditioned to perform for affection. Approval becomes a currency, attention a reward. A man learns that love must be won through success, confidence, status, or sacrifice. And while this script may seem harmless in youth, by middle age, it becomes a psychological trap. Carl Jung once wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. For many men, chasing love is exactly that, an unconscious repetition of a deeper need, to be seen, to be enough. But when a man finally recognizes this pattern, when consciousness replaces compulsion, the chase collapses. Because he begins to understand that what he was running toward was never love, it was recognition. Modern culture exploits this blind spot. It builds industries around male validation, from luxury branding to dating algorithms, each whispering the same message: earn affection through improvement. The man who follows that message spends years optimizing himself, not for peace, but for approval. And then, somewhere around 40, a quiet realization dawns. No amount of achievement makes him more loved, only more useful. That's the mechanism. The chase was never about attraction. It was about survival inside a psychological economy that trades emotional worth for performance. Look deeper into the data. In 2022, a study from the American Psychological Association found that men in midlife experience the highest levels of achievement anxiety, the fear of losing value as productivity declines. When that anxiety meets the transactional reality of modern relationships, where both men and women unconsciously measure worth through what's offered rather than what's felt, the result is burnout. Emotional, existential burnout. Schopenhauer described desire as a pendulum between pain and boredom. The pursuit brings pain, the attainment brings emptiness. Men over 40, after decades of swinging between the two, begin to crave stillness. And in that stillness, they see clearly, the world doesn't teach connection. It teaches consumption. That's why many men disengage. They stop feeding a system that turns intimacy into transaction. Psychologically, this is evolution, not retreat. Harvard psychiatrist Dr. Robert Waldinger in the ongoing Grant study notes that as men age, their motivation shifts from competition to connection, from striving to meaning. The older man's mind becomes less reward-driven, more purpose-oriented. He no longer seeks the dopamine of pursuit. He seeks the serenity of alignment. But society rarely honours this transformation. It romanticizes youth, the thrill, the chase, the chaos, and mocks maturity as apathy. The truth is the opposite. It takes far more courage to stand still and feel than to chase and distract. There's another layer here, the biological one. Testosterone, the fuel of pursuit, naturally declines after 40. But this isn't loss, it's recalibration. Lower impulsivity allows for higher awareness. The man becomes more reflective, less reactive. Studies from the University of Cambridge show that older men display greater emotional regulation and empathy in long-term relationships. The body itself begins guiding him toward depth, and yet the world tells him to resist this shift, to keep chasing, to stay hungry. But hunger without purpose becomes noise. It's not masculinity, it's misdirection. The hidden truth then is this. The system wants men to chase because the chase keeps them distracted. A man constantly proving his worth is a man who never questions his cage. When he finally pauses, he sees how every unreturned message, every ghosted connection, every shallow encounter was never personal. It was structural. A symptom of a culture that has replaced meaning with marketing. This is where awakening begins. He realizes that love, real love, was never something to get. It was something to give from wholeness. And wholeness cannot coexist with desperation. So he redefines pursuit. He doesn't stop loving, he stops bargaining. He no longer measures intimacy by attention, but by presence. He no longer equates silence with rejection, but with discernment. He begins to understand that solitude is not absence, it's preparation. That the man who learns to be still in his own company becomes magnetic without effort, because peace itself radiates a frequency stronger than desire. This is not resignation, it's reclamation. The man over 40 doesn't quit love. He graduates from its illusions. He no longer confuses chaos with passion, nor performance with worth. He steps out of the marketplace and back into meaning, where love is not currency, but communion. That's the hidden truth. Men don't stop chasing love because they've grown cold. They stop because they've finally grown conscious. There's a silence that follows a man when he stops chasing. It isn't defeat. It's the echo of everything he once gave to a world that only applauded the performance. Never the person. In his 30s, he could still run on hope that maybe the next attempt would feel different. But by 40, he's lived enough cycles to recognize the pattern. He remembers the nights of effort, the gestures, the proving, the long messages that ended in indifference. Each rejection didn't just wound his ego, it fractured his belief in reciprocity. And slowly, something inside began to close, not out of bitterness, but preservation. When a man has spent years pouring into others without being met, he begins to understand that exhaustion can disguise itself as strength. He starts smiling less in photos, speaking less in rooms, listening more than he responds. On the outside, he looks calm, but inside he's quietly measuring the cost of his own vulnerability. According to research from the University of Zurich, middle-aged men report the steepest drop in perceived emotional safety in relationships. Not because they've grown colder, but because experience has made them cautious. They've learned that openness can be currency in a world that trades in advantage. This is the quiet cost. He becomes selective, guarded, deliberate. He's still capable of deep emotion, but only when it feels earned. He no longer bleeds just because someone asks him to, and yet, this withdrawal has a shadow. the same armor that protects him, also isolates him. Solitude becomes both sanctuary and sentence. He wakes up one morning in a quiet apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor. The air is still, there's peace, but also an ache. The kind of ache that doesn't come from loneliness, but from the absence of being understood. He's learned to be okay alone, but a part of him still misses the language of connection, the warmth of being seen without effort. The paradox deepens, because while he's mastered independence, he secretly mourns what it cost him. Spontaneity, trust, wonder. He has built peace, but at the price of possibility. Psychologically, this is what researchers call protective withdrawal. It's the mind's way of preserving energy after repeated emotional depletion. Studies from the University of Toronto show that men who experience high emotional labour in relationships are 40% more likely to disengage in midlife, seeking restoration through solitude rather than risk. It's not weakness, it's recovery. Still, recovery isn't the same as fulfillment. He learns to find meaning in work, in purpose, in the gym, in quiet routines. But every now and then, when the day slows, when a song from years ago plays, he feels the soft pull of something unfinished. The memory of a man who once believed, and that's the truth no one talks about. Behind the stoic calm of men who've stopped chasing lies a quiet grief. Not for the women they lost, but for the parts of themselves they silenced. The dreamer, the romantic, the fool who used to hope without calculation. He didn't stop chasing because he hates love. He stopped because love, as he knew it, began to feel like a test he could no longer pass. So he builds walls, but leaves the gate unlocked. He won't go searching, but he won't turn away if something real approaches. And if you ask him, in the stillness of an honest moment, what he truly wants, he won't say excitement or perfection or even happiness. He'll say, peace, with someone who understands why I had to stop running. That's the emotional cost and the paradoxical reward. He loses the illusion but gains clarity. He feels emptier but becomes freer. He carries scars but also wisdom, a kind of masculine grace that only comes from surviving both love and the absence of it. Because the man who has stopped chasing has not stopped feeling. He's simply learned that peace too is a form of love. There's a quiet liberation in the moment a man realizes he no longer needs to chase love to feel worthy of it. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a vow made in defiance, but a slow awakening, a reorientation of the soul. Because at some point, a man begins to understand that love was never something to find. It was something to remember. The capacity for it was always there, buried beneath performance, expectation, and exhaustion. The first step isn't to search outward, but to return inward, to sit in solitude not as punishment, but as practice, to learn again how to be enough in silence. Psychologists call this self-integrity, when a man's external behaviour aligns with his inner truth. Studies from the University of Rochester show that individuals with high self-integrity report significantly greater emotional stability and relationship satisfaction regardless of marital status. It means peace is not the absence of love, it's the foundation of it. When a man stops chasing, he doesn't reject love. He redefines it. He begins to see that love cannot be pursued. It can only be invited, through presence, through clarity, through alignment with one's own values. And that realization changes everything. He no longer seeks the adrenaline of pursuit, but the calm of understanding. He learns that emotional mastery isn't detachment, it's discernment, the ability to feel deeply without being controlled by feeling. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That's the essence of this transformation. A man moves from seeking completion to embodying wholeness. In practice, it looks simple, but it isn't. He stops forcing connection. He stops negotiating his peace to keep company. He begins valuing the slow rhythm of genuine compatibility over the thrill of instant chemistry. When men cultivate inner stillness, something paradoxical happens. They become more magnetic. Not because they try, but because authenticity carries a quiet gravity. People sense stability. They feel presence. The same energy once wasted on proving is now radiated through being. This isn't isolation, it's evolution. Because awareness is not withdrawal, it's awakening. He learns to engage consciously, to listen, to observe, to meet others without pretense or demand. He no longer asks, will this fulfill me? But rather, does this align with who I am becoming? And that single question becomes his compass. It's in this state that real love, not the dramatized version, not the digital echo, becomes possible again. Love that grows, not because it's chaste, but because it's chosen. Love that thrives, not because it's loud, but because it's consistent. In psychological terms, it's a shift from attachment-driven love to awareness-driven love. The former feeds on fear, the latter grows through freedom. And freedom for a man begins when he stops equating love with loss of self. He doesn't need to escape relationships. He needs to rebuild his relationship to himself. That's where mastery lives. When he can stand fully as himself, strong, calm, aware, and still remain open to another's presence without compromise or performance. So the way out is not escape, it's integration, to live with depth, to choose with clarity, to connect with intention, to build a life where love is not a prize but a practice. That's the new mindset, grounded, awake, unshaken. Because once a man understands that peace and love are not opposites, he no longer has to choose between them. He becomes the still point around which meaning gathers, and in that stillness, love no longer needs to be chased. It simply arrives, quietly, naturally, as reflection meets recognition. There's a silence that follows awakening. Not the silence of emptiness, but of clarity. It's the kind of quiet that arrives after years of noise. When a man finally stops trying to prove, persuade, or perform, and simply exists as he is. That's where men over 40 often find themselves. Not bitter, not defeated, just done pretending. They've learned that love, as the world sells it, was never built for truth. It was built for consumption, a marketplace of validation, endless, restless, disposable. But real connection, the kind that nourishes rather than drains, doesn't live in that economy. It lives in stillness. It lives in those rare moments when a man's heart beats without needing to be understood. When he no longer fears solitude, he becomes impossible to manipulate. Because solitude isn't loneliness, it's strength in its purest form. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." And perhaps that's what this stage of life teaches, how to finally sit still, how to see without grasping, love without losing yourself, and live without the constant noise of needing more. It's strange, as when you stop chasing, the world starts revealing. You begin to notice that love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. It becomes respect, it becomes peace, it becomes the gentle smile you give to the stranger who reminds you of your younger self. Still running, still searching, still believing that being chosen means being enough. But you've learned that being enough was never dependent on being chosen. It was always about being aware, and awareness is the real revolution. In that awareness, men find something more powerful than love. They find freedom. Freedom from comparison, from expectations, from the illusion that happiness must arrive in someone else's hands. A study published by the American Psychological Association found that men who practice self-reflection and mindful solitude report significantly higher life satisfaction and lower anxiety, even compared to those in romantic relationships. The data is clear. Peace of mind is not a reward for finding love. It's the foundation that allows love to exist at all. So maybe men over 40 don't stop loving. They just stop losing themselves in love. They've learned to walk beside it, not beneath it, to give it space, and in return, it gives them back their soul. That's the hidden truth society rarely speaks of. A man's greatest transformation isn't when he finds the right woman. It's when he finds the right center. And from that center, everything else falls into place naturally. No chase, no noise, no pretending. just quiet alignment between who he is and how he lives. Pause. If these words reach something in you, if they echoed a truth you felt but never voiced, then this space is for you. Because here, we don't chase illusions, we uncover them. We don't worship comfort, we confront reality. And we don't seek followers, we seek men who are ready to wake up. So, if that's you, stay, listen, think, reflect, subscribe. Not to me, but to your own awareness. Because what we're building here isn't an audience, it's a mirror for every man who's done running and ready finally to stand still and see himself again. Fade out slowly. Music lingers, calm, low, reflective. The voice lowers one last time. Peace isn't found in the arms of another. It's found in the moment you finally stop running from yourself.